we had to kind of change what we were building, because like we could have the shiniest, fanciest seats in the world, but no one's going to sit in them if there's an agent around the corner. He'll just do all your work for you. So when we pitch it to a business, we say, hey, you're currently drowning in hundreds of thousands or millions of tickets. We have a solution that will deliver a better, faster answer to all your customers 65% of the time. Deal on button for Finn, you're taking away over half your workload. And it'll actually trend upwards and upwards, which is as high as 94% total support resolutions.
Welcome to the show, Des. So, how are things?
Things are good. It's the end of the year. We're getting excited and inspired by what our ambitions are for next year.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get into some of those ambitions in due course. Firstly, just as by way of introduction, I suppose, for Intercom to some of the listeners here, can you give us an idea of who you are, what you do, and what problem you solve in the customer service space today?
Sure. So today we are primarily an AI solution for customer service. We build Finn, which is at this point relatively well known. It's a agentic customer support. So Finn is an agent that does all your support for you. The background behind that is the company is Intercom. We're about 14 and a half, 15 years old. Intercom, we set out to build a product that would let internet businesses talk to their customers. Over the years, we focused in on support. Then AI happened, we focused in on Finn. And so Finn has been our core focus for the last 3 years, I guess.
Yeah, great. And we'll get into that kind of evolution since the company was founded. But before we do, I mean, you've worn a few hats since co-founding Intercom. What does Chief Strategy Officer mean in this AI first era?
Yeah, it's a fluffy title for sure. Really, I like our CPO, our head of product, our CTO, our head of technology. They both report to me, and I kind of lead all of research and development, or like what we call like product building. So that's when everyone else is doing their job. My normal job is to lead all product design, engineering, etc. at Intercom.
Fantastic. All right, well, let's get into that transition from, I guess, what was first a kind of more traditional customer service or messaging company through to what is now an AI first company. Firstly, give us a sense of what that means to be an AI first company, and then we can talk through some of the changes that have happened along the way.
Yeah, when I say a company is AI first, I usually mean that they've approached solving the problem with a product that is conceived entirely from an AI first perspective. And what I mean by that is assuming AI exists and works, and they've been sufficiently ambitious in the application of it, they have taken an entirely like AI native approach towards solving the problem in their problem domain. And the reason that distinction is worth drawing is that I think there's a lot of incumbents who have products that are kind of, how would you say, AI agnostic. Mm-hmm. And what they've been trying to do is like sprinkle on bits of AI here and there, maybe a little bit of a co-pilot and a few sparkly buttons, but they're not necessarily doing what a new startup born today would do. And I think in that regard, they're kind of like they're not AI first. They're kind of leaning on the strengths of yesteryear and hoping that they can survive. Whereas an AI first approach is, I think, when you are willing to throw caution to the wind and say, let's build exactly what a startup would build if they were formed here today in 2025.
So what practical changes has that meant then in terms of hiring, research cadence, any kill rate for non-AI driven projects?
Yeah, I mean, it's meant so many changes. The most obvious one is it changes how you build software entirely, and it changes like who is involved at what stage. Historically, software was you could be forgiven for thinking about it like a factory, where the input was a customer problem, and you'd go through this fairly predictable routine, which was we will research the problem, understand the users, we will design a solution to the problem, we will build the solution, we will go through user testing, and we will ship, and we will iterate. And that, like, and then as a result, because that was such a linear process with high certainty, it did have a lot of attributes similar to a factory. And because of that, the goals very quickly become, quantity, efficiency, speed, etc. They're all valid, and that's still an important part of software building today. However, what AI has introduced is just this extreme layer of probabilism, where you don't really know if something's going to work. You don't know if it does work once. Will it work every time? Will it work enough times? Because of that, we're kind of moving from this factory mindset into something that's a lot closer to a lab mindset, which is experiments, uncertainty, empirical evidence, consistent evaluation, always trying new things. And every now and then you have what you could be forgiven for calling a breakthrough, which might be something like, hey, we've managed to guardrail the LLMs to successfully answer questions in this certain area or whatever. And then that breakthrough then has to get kind of commercialized. And in that world, you kind of do go a little bit back to the factory again, where you're like, right, given that we can do this, let's build the software around it. But I think that's the biggest sort of first change you make. For us, what it has meant is like, so much about the Intercom product prior to AI was assuming that there was humans who sat in seats having conversations with customers to deliver customer service. And when AI happened, it became very clear that that wasn't going to be true forever. Most customer service could be dealt with through these LLMs. And because of that, we had to kind of change what we were building, because like we could have the shiniest, fanciest seats in the world, but no one's going to sit in them if there's an agent around the corner who'll just do all your work for you. So really, our roadmap has become extremely AI focused, and what that means is building Fin as like our primary investment, and then for our help desk, looking at applications of AI that just focus on massively increasing the efficiency of the humans that deal with the Fin overflow, if you like, the stuff the Fin can't resolve.
Yeah. Okay, got it. Well, I think that's a perfect juncture then to discuss Fin. Give us a sense of what it is, as if you were explaining it to a non-technical listener, and where does it outperform a classic chatbot, for example?
Sure. So if I was talking to a non-technical person, I would say, hey, you know how ChatGPT seems to know lots of things, but occasionally it might hallucinate, and it doesn't necessarily go particularly deep in any given section. And then there might be things that it doesn't know because it's private, only known within a certain company policy. Well, imagine you were delivering a version of that knew everything about your business, talked to your customers on your behalf, and was guardrailed to stay totally on topic and only have conversations that represent the brand and tone of voice that you would want your company to have. And then imagine it was fully agentic, where it could go and carry out back office tasks. It could issue refunds, trigger reorders, and all that. And collectively, it will resolve, on average, 65% of your entire customer support volume. That's what Fin is. And so when we pitch it to a business, we say, hey, you're currently drowning in hundreds or millions of tickets, hundreds of thousands or millions of tickets. We have a solution that will deliver a better, faster answer to all your customers 65% of the time. The other 35%, it will typically hand over to your current help desk, whether that's Salesforce or Zendesk or whatever. But in doing so, in clicking this little on button for Fin, you're taking away over half your workload. And if you're willing to keep using it, it'll actually trend upwards and upwards. We have customers as high as 94% total support resolutions. So that's basically what Fin is, and that's how I'd explain it.
Yeah, great. I was going to ask you about resolution rates. With that in mind, then I suppose you price Fin per resolution versus tokens, seats, messages.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us about the kind of rationale for that and how you prevent bill shock at scale.
Yeah. When AI happened, it was the first time that software engineers and product teams had to deal with the fact that code didn't execute kind of for free anymore. It actually costs money to do these things. And because of that, you have to, the temptation for a lot of people, like when they're building these first wave of software innovations, which is typically copilots. A copilot would be something that sits on the right-hand side of the product and lets you helps you do the job. The problem with Copilot is it's a very incumbent product in that you build a Copilot assuming that nothing else is changing. Whereas in the case of Fin, we're actually doing the work. So the Copilot is increasingly there for a smaller number of people who are remaining, if you know what I mean. So because of that, things like doing an add-on model, which would be very typical in sort of software, would be like, hey, if it's an extra feature, it costs an extra $9 a month or whatever. That kind of doesn't make sense because the volume of execution really matters, and attaching it to seats when seats are going away doesn't really matter. It doesn't really make sense either. So we had to charge for something, and the question really was about, do we charge for the volume of work that we do, or do we charge for the volume of outcomes we deliver? Charging for volume of work would have been like, hey, Fin tried to handle 1 million conversations, so we're going to charge you 1 million times X.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could say, hey, Fin successfully handled 650,000 conversations, so we're going to charge you 650 times X. And we went for ultimately deciding what outcomes. The outcome logic was basically, we're heavily incentivized to make Fin better and better. Our customers want that too. And then there's a little bit of calculus around making sure that it didn't bankrupt us along the way. So you can kind of intuitively get the idea that like Fin is a cannibalistic product to the Intercom platform. The more Fin succeeds, the less, in theory, seats people will need in the future, or certainly the less seats they'll progressively buy into the future. And then so like you have to kind of make sure that all the maths adds up in some sense. You don't end up giving away the thing that becomes the dominant play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there was like that was ultimately the calculus that led to us finding what's the right price point. And then early on when ChatGPT launched, the initial tokens were quite expensive. I don't know if people remember that. I think a lot of people have memory hold this, but the first release of GPT 3.5 and 4 was pretty expensive to run. It's since fallen off a cliff price wise, thankfully, which is what has let us kind of get the price down to being about 99 cents an answer.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, with that in mind, then, can you give us a sense of the model mix that powers Fin today?
Yeah. So one of the common mistakes people make with products like Fin is that they'll think it's a single thing, and it really isn't. There's a whole architecture of AI you have to build to model any sort of how do you say workflow that a human might do. So if you like, people often think, how hard is customer support? Surely your average customer support query is like, hi, my name is Des, my email address is this, my account number is this, and I have 2 questions. Here's question 1, here's question 2, perfectly worded, no typos, blah, 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 right? People like to think that that's support. Support is not that. Support begins with, this is broken. And you're like, who are you and what's broken? So to correctly model what a customer support agent would do, you have to build all of these different sub processes. For example, like what we call phatic replies. That's like if someone just says hi, you have to know that it's okay to just say hi back. You don't immediately try and answer the query hi. That's a very basic one, but I'm just giving that as a simple example. Then you have things like query abstraction, you have things like clarification, disambiguation. Then you have things like escalation, like, hey, does this look like I should just hand it over to a human immediately? But somewhere along the way, you have to ask enough stuff of the end user to work out what the actual problem is, so that you can go and then ultimately fire what's called a RAG, or a retrieval augmented generation. So you can actually go and use the query that we have and all the knowledge we have, and given this query, find the relevant knowledge, attach all that together, and then given all that, we have what we call a direct answer model, which is like, given this information, answer this question. We believe the information answers the question. And for that direct answer model, we use Claude Sonnet. There are 27 or so different components of Fin. The number changes all the time. In loads of these cases, we're using our own in-house post-trained LLMs that are usually trained on Gwen. And we've been basically applying an entire corpus of, say, CS knowledge to it to really optimize it for the job that we do. And then in some areas, we're using OpenAI. In some areas, we're using Anthropic.
Got it. Okay. So perhaps if we can play sort of devil's advocate for a second, can you give us a sense of where Fin is still weak and where you're hoping to improve?
I think there's a few areas that are like the weakness comes from the burden that a business might have to go through to configure Fin to be capable of answering everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Basically, if you think about the way Fin works, a business teaches Fin and then Fin talks to customers. And I think given sufficient knowledge, Fin is already smart enough to deliver the mythical 100%, if you like. And the sort of hand wavy logic I'd use to evidence that is just like, if you look at what these latest models are capable of, they're the best mathematicians on earth. They're the best programming sort of performers on earth. Every single test we throw at them, they outperform humans. I don't think it's a huge leap to say, therefore, they're capable of doing frontline customer service, right? But the problem isn't that oftentimes. It's not more intelligence that we need to make these things perfect. It's largely a function of actually understanding the back office. So what's actually going on inside the product. So to make these things work, what you end up doing is saying to business as well, you need to teach Fin certain procedures. You need to keep it up to date with all your product updates. Areas that I'd love to see Fin expand into, like, could Fin possibly read the source code of a product to infer how it works? And in that regard, could it never have to, like, the business would never have to tell it. It would just know, because it could follow your blog and read your announcements and all that sort of stuff. Like, there are areas where I think we can still go further ourselves, again, with existing technology. But right now, what we see is the average customer returns on Fin. Most of them hit that 65% figure. I mean, 1/5 actually hit over 80%, to be clear. But when we look at what's left is often a complex gnarly, ambiguous back office task, which goes something like, we do refunds, but only if the customer seems really angry and if they haven't had 2 refunds already, and it has to go through this manager approval. And if we've already done 10 refunds that day, we don't do any more refunds. And it's not that that's so complex that AI can't get it, but it's just arduous to give Finn all of that in a policy. And a lot of people just say, I'll leave it, like it's grand, we'll just let the humans do it. So that's the kind of the barrier, is that we're probably still pushing a little bit too much work onto the business to get to the final mile. Now, obviously, we will, if they want to hire us as a pro serve agency, we'll step in and just do it for them, and some people do that. But I think that's the area where the last Alakazam, if you like, to fall will be something in that space.
Yeah, sorry. So just to go back on that, that is a service that you offer now. You go into a business and right.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, we have a pro serve function though, where like a lot of businesses, they don't actually, if you're moving from say like a BPO, a business process outsource, where like, hey, we just have this team in such and such a country and they do all our support, but Finn is clearly better, faster, and cheaper. We say, that's great, sounds good. Who runs support for you? And they say, well, that's the thing, we don't have anyone. So in that case, we'll step in and say, right, let us just set it up for you.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. And then just looking ahead then, what's the long-term split you envision between fully automated resolutions like the one Finn provides and AI-assisted human agents?
I would say, like, honestly, the answer will vary between B2B and B2C first. There'll be more variances, but just it's, everyone intuitively gets like B2C tends to have a higher volume of conversations, but they tend to be like simpler in nature. So if you think of like an e-commerce store, you have this extreme Pareto principle where probably 90% of their support volume can be handled with like 5 different types of queries. There's what we call WISMO, where is my order? There's like repeat my order. There's cancel my order, change my address. Like if you can actually just nail all of them, you can get into the high 80s, high 90s, kind of straight away. And in that regard, is 100% possible? Maybe not, but like 98% might be possible if you're willing to go to the final miles. When we get into sort of slightly more complex, arcane B2B SaaS type stuff, where the conversations can be extreme troubleshooting. And this can happen in prosumer too. Like, let's say you buy a really fancy new webcam and you're trying to make it work on an old MacBook, and at the same time you're missing a cable, so you've used this other cable. And it's not that the answer is unknowable, but it's like the mess to actually get the agent to work that out. At some point, what will happen is people just say, human, human, human. I just want to talk to a human. And because, so like, I think in B2B and like the high end of messy B2C prosumer, I think we might hit a tipping point that's maybe more like 80% or something like that. Again, I don't know. Like, it's possible that like the tech advances again and all of this just gets extremely easier. And there are like, to be really clear, we have competitors out there saying, oh, we can do 100. Well, we can do 110% of your support. Like, there's a lot of like lies. I'm just kind of giving you the basic facts. Like, most of the time we can do 80% plus for a fully mature customer. There are definitely going to be some businesses that are just messier. Like, the more bizarre and like the more long tail sort of types of questions you're going to deal with that are like require extreme troubleshooting, it's just hard to automate all them successfully.
Yeah. And to what extent then are you accommodating for people getting better at querying or prompting these sorts of services as they become more commonplace?
I think that's a big question. So right now we still get a lot of behavior. Like, you see this in society in general. So say our voice product, Finn Voice, a lot of people hear the voice, and as soon as they click that it's AI, they start going, human, 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 human. I don't want to talk to a bot. And then they get handed over to a human and it goes, welcome, you're now number 27 in the queue. And they're like, bot, 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 bot. Can I go back to the bot actually? And then the biggest to your point, the biggest evolution we've been slowly noticing is that once people realize that the best way to engage with a bot is actually to treat it like it's a human, because generally people sort of, their first pass on all these things is keyword stuffing. They just say like, hey, refund t-shirt or something like that. Whereas what they should say is, hi, I'm in France, I just ordered this thing, I need to change the address, and if you can't do that, I'd like to get a refund or something like that. And given all that context, you'll get a way better outcome. So I think as humans get better at interacting with AI, it's possible that that's another sort of vector of overall improvement as well. There's also just this like flywheel effect where like with Finn, every time Finn hands over to a human, it doesn't just throw it over a wall and look away. It follows that conversation to work out what happened in reality with the human. And then it will then go back to the business and say, hey, I keep handing over these questions about like Christmas coupons or whatever it is. It looks like you don't honor last year's coupons. Can you confirm that for me? If you confirm that for me, I won't have to hand them over anymore. Like our goal with Finn is that the human support team should be answering things for the first time and the last time. Like one human writes the canonical response, Finn ingests that, and then that query never gets handed over again. That's where we want to get to.
Yeah, and with that in mind, then, just to use that kind of Christmas coupon example, is it acting then almost as like a BI analyst, kind of pointing out or highlighting inefficiencies or flaws within a business? Like, have you got some examples of that happening in the real world?
Yeah, totally. So we have a whole product called Insights. It's like fin.ai/insights, where we'll show you everything that's going on in your customer conversations. We'll say like, here's the types of conversations that annoy your customers. Here's where they get happy outcomes. Here's the volume that's coming out of nowhere. Here's what's spiking suddenly. Here's where we think we're missing information. Here's where we think we're missing data access. Here's where we think we're missing API endpoints that clearly it looks like your customer support team have. And we're doing all this to try and say like, hey, we can do more for you, but you just need to like equip us with more. Like a common question we get at this point is like, why doesn't Finn just automatically do all these things? And the answer is that like you need somebody in the business to actually bless or authorize each of these answers, because maybe you do actually honor Christmas coupons and you just, that the intern didn't realize, and also his answers become codified forever. So you actually have to have like some structured way to say this is true. Yeah.
Great. Okay, well, let's move on to cover, I guess, competition, the competitive landscape. But before we do that, I suppose to give some context to your background, I've seen back tools like Notion, Synesthesia, Levity. What, in your experience, what early signals in AI best practice give you durable moats at public scale?
I think I often refer to 4 criteria that I need to see if I'm investing in a company or if I'm taking another company seriously, from any professional perspective. It's really like in order. This has to be real. How would you say? AI is rife with what I call shelfware. Like somebody bought something. You see this a lot with, say, something like Agent Force or whatever. Mm-hmm. It was bought. It's sitting on a shelf. No one's touched it for a year. Like it's really important the product is used by customers. It's really, so that's criteria 1. It sounds ridiculous to say that, but you watch. You know what I mean? Number 2 is it should solve a real business problem. And again, that sounds ridiculous, but there are a lot of cool tools out there. And I really just mean cool with like a capital C, if you know what I mean. Like, it's fun to play with this thing. It's great that you can generate fun email, image, newsletter headers or something like that. But no one on earth is going to pay for it, and it doesn't matter how cool it gets, right? But it is cool, So I think AI is awash with cool tools along with shelfware. The third is that there needs to be like deeply differentiated AI. So it can't just be a thin wrapper that you just share. Like, it can't be something that like I could build in a weekend by just handing the whole problem over to like OpenAI or Anthropic. So there has to be something that's meaty there, and that's why I reference that 27 system sub architecture of Finn. Mm-hmm. That, like there has to be a real gnarly problem at the core. It can't be really simple. And then the last one is there just has to be some evidence that the margin can turn positive. Now, people often ding me on this one and they don't like this answer, but really what I mean by that is going back to the earlier idea that, hey, like it turns out executing code can cost money. It's really important that you're not spending a phenomenal amount of tokens to do something that is not of proportionate value at all. So if you're burning the entire haystack to find the single needle and people don't even really care that much about the needle, that's not an efficient business. And it actually doesn't really matter how cheap things get. Like, it does in some sense matter, but like things can get it can get messy if you're gonna be burning a phenomenal amount of expensive tokens to do something that's only incrementally barely useful, even if it is a real problem or whatever. Like I think the dynamics of that might not work out over time. So I'd rather see an actual path to like efficiency here. And by efficiency, I just mean don't find a better way to solve the problem quicker, faster, cheaper.
Yeah. Okay, great. I think that provides good context for the next question then, because I want to ask you about Intercom's moat in, I guess, what is increasingly an LLM commoditizing world. Data flywheels, distribution, workflows, domain specific evals. Where's Intercom's moat? And obviously, it could be in several of those areas, but give us a sense of that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, firstly, I'd say like broad strokes, I don't really believe in like an extremely deep moats anymore. I think just there's a few things that have happened over the years that have changed my opinion here. Like code has begun to commoditize in the sense of like Claude Code and like Codex and all the, Cursor, etc. It's getting a lot easier to produce a lot of code, and then this idea of like data as a moat, I think is like really overstated. I think it's becoming it's easier now than ever to transpose data from one application to another or to copy things across. Now, the reality is the way this is being fought today, you're probably familiar with today, what Salesforce are doing with Slack against, say, someone like Lean is they're actually attacking it from a point of view of rather than fighting the product battle, let's fight the legal battle, right? So there might be actual legalese moat there that we'll see how that plays out. I don't know if that's in customers' best interests, even if it is in say Salesforce's. So where do I actually think moats matter? Well, I think to really talk about like a business moat, you have to look at what the business does and where it does it in the market. What we build is the only so let's assume, right, in our opinion and by our numbers and by our metrics and bake-offs, Finn is the highest performing agent. But you are right. The market is a wash of them. There's like dozens of them, right? So that you could argue like that they're inter swappable or whatever. We are the only people building a world class agent on top of an actual help desk product as well. So there's this deep, rich integration. You can, of course, use the agent separately if you wish. If you want to use it on Zendesk, you can. But if people go shopping for a complete solution to customer service, what that to us means is they want an agent, a help desk, and they want all the channels covered. So that's one whole area where there's nobody else like us. The second thing I'd say is we're also one where you can manage it yourselves. So there are tools like Sierra and Decagon, and there's a couple others in that space. I believe Giga just launched recently, where yes, they can deliver you some AI outcomes, but it's much more like a Palantir style deployment where like consultants come on site with their clipboards and all that sort of stuff and they configure things. And if you want to make changes, you talk to them and they make changes for you and you're probably on some sort of retainer and all that sort of stuff. Like it's a different engagement model akin to like, do you want to have a web team or do you want to outsource your entire website to somebody else? And like both are valid options, but like we are the ones who are building the actual agent platform where you can control, analyze, train, test, and deploy your agent, as opposed to kind of like having somebody do that for you and hit you with the bill. So that's a way in which we're pretty different. If you actually want to go and do your own thing, like and actually, basically build out your support strategy, we are the platform that actually gives you the tooling for that. The last area that we've only really started to announce over the last 2 or 3 weeks is just this idea of moving from being a CS agent to being an actual customer agent. That is being the agent that will actually not just handle support, but potentially handle, say, like the SDR type agent on your website, your onboarding agent, your customer success agent, your retention agent, your upsell agent. We believe that like the market equilibrium here will not be every business goes and buys 11 different agents. We actually believe they're going to buy and train and adopt one agent, and that will be better for their end users. So you don't have all these different agents shouting across each other, and better for the business where you only have to basically codify and teach one agent and as opposed to dozens of them. Again, we don't see anyone else touching these types of jobs, and that's another area where we're like product level differentiated. I will say, all of that said, my earlier point still applies. I don't believe that those types of moats are sustainable. I think that brand and community are still going to be the residual longer moats.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. And possibly a question I should have asked earlier, but we touched on kind of prevention of kind of bad outcomes, and I wanted to ask you about silent failure modes. Confidently wrong answers that have the potential, at least, to harm brand trust. So, what are the human in the loop thresholds that you recommend? How does that work?
The way we test against this is we take this extremely rigorous scientific method approach. Like most of our AI group are scientists. They're not like B2B SaaS engineers who decided to dabble in AI. They're actual bona fide scientists, mathematicians, etc. what we have to do is we have this torture test. So whenever we make a change to how Fin works, we have thousands of scenarios that we will evaluate Fin through. That will mean basically like we will tempt it to hallucinate, as in we'll give it like most of the information, but not all of it, and see if it hallucinates. We will tempt it to go off topic. We'll like, we'll do all of the sort of, we'll obviously try to jailbreak it and all that type of stuff. And then separately, we'll also just give it a load of scenarios where it should know the answer and where it definitely shouldn't know the answer. And there's also a context of like a good answer versus a correct but not useful answer, like something like no, as opposed to no, here's how you could do that though, like that type of thing. So whenever, when people ask us, oh, I saw GPT 4.5 dropped, why haven't you tested it? Why isn't it live yet? The answer is because we're in the lab. We're like literally running through and eyeballing all these scenarios to come to a really confident belief that this is a superior model to what we have. So that's the sort of the guardrails we've had to build. That's what gets us to, I think we're kind of like 99.9 or maybe 99 in terms of like hallucination prevention, what we would call like an ungrounded inference. And that's like, it's funny, like doing all that work is actually, it can be at odds with actually our own resolution rate, because sometimes if you have more swings, you might be successful. We don't want to be successful in an ungrounded way because we know that there's a shadow side to that we don't want to touch. So that's why we take that so seriously.
Yeah, great. Okay, cool. Yeah, glad I answered. So we'll finish with our lightning round. So we've got 4 questions here. I think I'll ask. So shorter, kind of quicker answers if possible. The first one misconception about AI and customer service you wish people would retire.
That it's easy and you can build it yourself.
Yeah, nice. So on the flip side then, one near-term breakthrough that would mean or would most improve Fin's economics or accuracy?
The degree to which Fin can interrogate internal business processes and machine code and all that, and actually draw on new knowledge that wasn't previously codified within a business, would massively increase the amount of resolutions it could deliver.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Question 3 then. The most underrated risk in this particular market?
Convergence, I would say. Yeah, I just think there's everyone is at some abstract level, everyone's building the same thing. And as a result, you end up with competitors coming at you from weird angles that you wouldn't have expected.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And then the final question then, if you had to make one 5-year prediction about AI agents in customer service, what would it be?
I think it would be that the market finds a solution that is into the like 90s or high 90s for resolution rate, and that the battleground is not 3D AI avatars and virtual faces and all that, but it's basically who can deliver the better, faster, cheaper solutions, including proactive support. I think that's the one area. Once you solve all the reactive stuff, everyone's minds are going to turn to this idea of like, how can we get ahead of problems for our users, versus, how can we detect a struggling user, somebody who's misconfigured, somebody who's about to have a problem. Like every time you're releasing a product and you have like a red blinking light or you pop an error message, you should really assume that that's the beginning of a support conversation. So the question should really turn immediately into, how do I make sure, rather than showing the error, why don't I just show the solution? Why don't I just do the solution? So I think proactive support will become the future battleground of this space.
Yeah, fantastic. I think a nice insight to end on, and hopefully that prediction comes to be true. That just leaves me to say thank you very much for joining us on the podcast, Des. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, it's been a great chat. Thanks so much.